Being a smart person like I am, I figured, you know, I hadn't been tattooing very long. Who's going to hire me? I better buy the shop so I have a place to work.
Yeah.
And then when I got divorced, I gave the husband, the ex-husband, the house, and I took the shop.
Smart move.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up being a shop owner. And the shop there in Fort Myers is still running today, Ancient Art Tattoo Studio. Like I said, Gil started it in '87, and I took it over till about '96, I think. I took a partner with Bill Hannon. When I finished, and I sold out to him, and then he sold to Isabel Hitchcock. So there's only been really 4 owners of that studio, and Isabel owns it today. Yeah, it's running strong. It's a great little shop. It's real comfortable. Nice shop.
The tattoos were so half-assed, you know what I mean? Ollie drew all our flash that went on the wall, which was good, and back then he would freehand. Everything would be freehand right on skin. When I kind of joined in about a year later and was trying to do what he did, the spring of '76, and when I got in, I didn't have a tattoo. Never thought about a tattoo, in all honesty. But I cared about what it was I did, like most women. They care about what they're not just doing a tattoo to get the money. The guys back then, especially the old timers, the only reason they did tattoos was for the money. You know, they would take exactly what was on that design and do exactly that. And back then, you would actually tattoo something, it feels like a million times, but it wasn't. It was like Hurley logos, Death Before Dishonor, stuff like that. You would do that quite often. You did it repeatedly. Whereas now, generally, you only do a design one time. So to me, we had it easier, you know, because you kept doing the same thing repetitively. There was another girl who used to tattoo, and I met her in Bell. I can't think of what her last name is. I met her at the '79 convention, and she was married to a biker, but she only did it for a short time. And what I really don't know is whether she was the first or I was the first. But I started, actually I did my first tattoo in 1972, and I did that with Bill Pogue. And Bill Pogue has a tattoo school in Shreveport, Louisiana, to this day, I believe.
I'm Bill Pogue. I'm the director of World's Only Tattoo School, and I started the classes in 1968. They were 7 weekend seminars a month apart. In the 90s, we converted to the present system, which is a 2-week intensive. Essentially, it's divided into 4 sections. Our school has trained more tattoo artists than any other school, all the schools combined forever. There's no such thing as a second place. It just isn't.
The men like you because you were a woman, more so than anything else. And what the girls don't know today is you got, you know, people put their hands in places they weren't supposed to, and you trying to work, you know. It was tough, you know, it was tough because I don't think you got the respect. You know, the women didn't give you respect a lot of times, and the men didn't give you respect a lot of times. Mm-hmm.
So tell me your experience about Deana's show.
Deana's show?
Yes.
Deana's show was better than most because she had little classes in there with your bloodborne passages, and it was all women. It really gave tattooing some class, if you ask me. Because of the way women would design their booths and stuff, it wasn't plain at all. It was a real class act.
And a lot of the really respected guys came and supported us a lot. I mean, it was time for us to have a tattoo show for the women. Yeah, it was time.
And I believe wasn't it in a hotel? I'm not sure, but it wasn't huge like it is today.
Right.
You know, some of these people, 1,000 booths, stop. You know?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a lot. As a matter of fact, my nephew bought me a scooter just so I could go to those shows. That's how big they are.
Yeah.
You know?
That's so true. How do you feel about the women today that are tattooing? Is there anybody in particular that pops up to your mind that you really enjoyed looking at their artwork?
There's so many. Mm-hmm. You know, there are so many. It's hard to really take out one. I think with the women especially, the art has progressed. I really believe that. You know, the men are good too now. I'm not saying they're not. But I'm saying what I see from at the time that I came in, that the women are much more caring about what it is they do.
Yes, I get that a lot.
And you know, that's why we're here this weekend, is because of Deana, and because we're celebrating our friendship, talking about how big the conventions are now. It wasn't that big, but we all kind of knew each other.
We did.
And we're all still friends today. And we were losing a lot of our old timers now, and the guys and the girls. And we just got thinking, and it's like, well, let's get together, and we don't have to make a convention out of it, but let's celebrate ourselves. And it's been just a glorious weekend, having a good time. And, you know, tattooing right now is rocking. I mean, the styles are amazing. You know, it's not anything that we hardly even dreamed about. We were talking about that earlier. You know, graduating the art schools and then coming into tattooing. There's things available to them, like the tattoo magazines were our internet. You know, now they have all the different, the Procreate, the different machines, the cordless, that you don't need, you know, the lights, camera, and action. You know, everything's so different. You know, this technology has taken it so far ahead. And I always have to mention spell check, because it's like, God bless spell check when that came around, you know?
Generally at our age, you're not doing that big old piece. You're doing a smaller piece. So it really doesn't matter which machine you use.
Yeah. It's like tattooing's my life. That's what I've done, you know? That was my whole being, you know? That's why I'm here. Of course, I miss going to the shop every day. You know, I miss the people, I miss the excitement and stuff like that. But at the same time, you know, I'm not one to sit around. So I'm going to school, I'm doing something different, I'm doing energy work, I'm doing the tapping, I'm getting ready to graduate, and I got lots of plans. And it includes all my tattoo friends, you know, so life is great, you know, I'm enjoying my age.
Hey,
I mean, I raised hell when I was young. Never thought I'd make it to 30.
I never get away from tattooing. My cars all have tattooing on the side, all this kind of stuff. And I promote, my goal in this whole profession was to promote tattooing.
That's right.
And obviously I did good. Look at what we got.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was what National always said too. It's like, that's why we came to the convention. That's why we make conventions, to promote tattooing.
Back in the day, it was so looked down upon. Even my mother said, when I got my first tattoo, or maybe it was a second, she said, "You got another one of those tattoos?"
Yeah.
And I wasn't asking my parents for a dime. You know, it was keeping me going.
Yeah.
But it was just not acceptable.
And you know, that was one of the things too that it wasn't actually spoken like this, but every time we had a tattoo convention with National, it was booked in a hotel, and everyone pretty much knew that the staff, the management, everybody was nervous that we were coming. Oh, what's going to happen? These heathens are coming, you know.
And it was so hard to rent a place.
It really was. It was very hard, because the hotels had to have their insurances and everything. They're taking it to management. It was like they were taking a huge chance on some crazy bike club or something, you know.
That's for sure.
That they were just putting themselves in a position where they were going to get the whole place torn up. And when we came, we dressed good. We had evening gowns for our contests. We all tipped. We all made extra effort to be respectful and courteous to the staff. They always wanted us to come back next year. And that was our goal, was to make it and change it, you know, change the persona of tattooing. And I think, you know, through the years, it's different now, and it's different from when we were going to the shows, but it was really wonderful to be involved in all that evolution.
It will change in some form, because it changed for us, and it will change again for these people. I'm sure you've seen, a couple years ago they had a machine that pre-did tattoos for you. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the way, but there's going to be a change. Just like the iPads and things like that. The iPads opened up a lot of doors for a bunch of people who aren't even artists.
Right.
You know?
A lot of the shops now have a licensed person that does tattoo removal, and the big laser machines and all that kind of stuff. You know, Lauren's shop does, and you know, a lot of them do, and that opens up a whole different avenue to. Okay, so you've got this whole back piece, and you can change it, make it go away, and change it. We never even dreamed of that option, to let alone have it as an actual reality.
Right. Some of the tat work, in my opinion, is it's so tight that it begins to blur out. But a lot of the college kids especially, like that teeny tiny writing and things like that, and I always say 5 years, that's going to blur out. Most of the time I'm right. But we've had experimental stuff too, like the one line, the one needle. This is an Ed Hardy piece. You can't tell what it is, but maybe I wasn't supposed to live this long. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But,
I do.
Yeah, you know. Because at one time I saw Ed and I said, man, this guy, this messed up. I just blurred out. What happened was we didn't know. Like the youngsters today, they don't know. So you can't be mad at somebody. But this piece here would have been fine if you had opened it up and not put so much detail. But it took time to learn that.
That's all that Cherry Creek that Rand Johnson did. They were beautiful drawings, beautiful designs. We made so much money in all the shops from that. And Jack Rudy's design that Gil did on me, you know, just too tight. You know,
It's too tight.
You know, they muddied up, and you know, it just.
But I mean, this thing looked good for at least 25, 30 years.
Absolutely.
But this is a 50-year-old tattoo.
I hear you.
You know what I'm saying? So when I got my tattoos, what I was doing was experimenting to see what would be best on brown skin. Common sense tells you now to open up the design, and it'll last longer, I believe. You know, I've got them with pretty simple stuff, and they're holding up good now. For me, for what I saw back in the days, when we made our own inks, we did better, and they held up longer and brighter. Didn't you think?
I didn't have any trouble with those inks. They were great, and I've seen a lot of the work it's still color in
Comes
it.
back, got color in it.
But as far as the needles go, I do not miss soldering needles every day.
You're right, you're right. But let me say this. The people today should still loop some of those needles.
Yes,
All those Chinese are not always right.
That's right.
You know what I
That's
mean? I'm not saying they're bad, but I think you could loop the needles. Because you got such a big variety of needles too now.
Yeah.
The bug pins and tapered pins and short tapers, long tapers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I like them myself. I like the magazines because I can go back and look at it. You know what I mean? Whereas the podcast for me, I'll catch it, but then it'll get lost, and I may not know how to go back and get it either. So the magazines, I think, are real good personally.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the magazines. They were our internet before. You know, that's how people found out who I was my picture was in the magazines. You know, I didn't know, going down to Mexico City was an awakening last 5 years ago, you know, and like, oh, everybody knows you here. I'm like, what the hell? That's not true. And I got down there and they did know me, and it was because of the magazines. I miss the magazines because they're something you can hold on to, open them up. Unfortunately, I understand that magazines, newspapers, all that thing are really a difficult thing. It's like having a perishable item. You know, it's hard to market, it's hard to get sold, it's hard to, they're heavy, hard to distribute, you know, that kind of stuff. The podcasts are great, love them. It takes time, you have to have a chunk of time, because if you're going to get into something that's relevant or has any kind of meat to it, it's probably going to be about an hour, and you have to, whereas a magazine you can
go back and look at it.
Yeah,
that's what I like about it.
It's hard to stop things and find it again and all that kind of thing. A lot of the reason that Jackie, myself, Sofia, Deana, why we're here is to meet the younger girls. You know, we want to share our stories. We want to hear their stories. How'd they get into it? What do they do? And what do they like? You know, that's how it's going to be. You know, it's the same way that we got our stories. We got our stories by being around Paul Rogers, around Lyle Tuttle, around Don Nolan, around Jack Rudy. You know, those were our guys, you know, and the interaction with them, the going out to dinner, all the bullshit crazy stuff that we all did, you know, those are our stories and those formed us, and that's what will happen again. But it won't if everybody's on their damn phone all the time and they don't make the effort to come and get personal. You know, there's a lot to be said about getting a hug.
So I am Sofia Estrella now, aka Miss Deborah, aka Deborah Inksmith. I go back to 1981. My first tattoo was in Eric Inksmith's studio in Brunswick, Georgia, because there wasn't any other place to get one in Florida at the time. So the closest place we could find a tattoo, I went with a boyfriend. I had no interest in tattoos at all until I was dating a guy with a tattoo, and he was like, one day, let's just go get a tattoo. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So the Eric Inksmith fell in love with me because I was a pretty hot little chick back then. And thanks, babe. I didn't pay her to say that either. So so one thing led to another. We started dating, and I was a bookkeeper, so I started doing his books, and I figured I was struggling raising a child by myself, driving an hour one way to work back and forth. Saw it as an opportunity. I started doing his books and saw the money he was bringing, and I'm like, well, if he had a woman in there helping him, he could double his money, you know, and both between the two of us, we could do really good, you know. So I was dating him, so I needed to marry him because they wanted to send me to Texas to be a sales secretary, so that did not appeal to me at all. I was pretty much an artist my whole life, but never recognized. They didn't do that back then. The last thing they wanted you to do is be an artist or a musician or anything back in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, because
they said you couldn't make a living being an artist.
They wanted you to be a glorified waitress in the sky or a secretary or something that had to do with like working in the women like concept world. So anyway, I'd never fit in a square peg in the round hole thing anyhow. So I looked at this guy. I was at his house, and it was the smell of green soap, man, hit me like, took me by the nostrils and drugged me in that tattoo shop. The images busted in everywhere, color and drawings and the sound of that machine and the people coming in, and I was like, where am I right now? And I'm like in this dark, and he's smoking cigarettes and this dark magic place, and I'm like, I am in a magical world. I got to know more about this, and that was my first experience getting a tattoo. I fell in love. We started dating, I got into it, and the first tattoo I did, unfortunately, was on a 15-year-old girl, and he was just like, she walks in with her mom, he's like, okay, well, you're going to do this tattoo, and I was like, what, you know? So I used to take little designs home for when we were dating, and I was a runner, so I'd run. I was caring for my son by myself, running like at midnight. I'd go run for a mile at night. Every single night I would run for a mile before I'd go to bed. My son was asleep, had a sitter. I'd come home, take a shower, start drawing. I had these little drawings. I had a little table, a little light, and I'd sit there and trace stuff, you know. I was trying to get good with my hand. Poor thing, I did this tattoo on this little girl, and it was just horrible. I could not hit the line. I could not, shaking like a leaf. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't keep the skin tight. Didn't remember anything. I freaked out. So anyway, I told him, I said, if I ever do that again, I will never pick up a tattoo machine as long as I live. And I will never do this again, because I was sick to my stomach. I went to bed. The next tattoo I did, he said, you're going to do on me. So I did it on him. And he walked me through the whole thing, and it was flawless. And he said, well, that's it. You can do this. So the next few tattoos, I did 1 or 2 tattoos at home, and then we went to New Orleans. And I walked in Jackie's shop in New Orleans, and I think I did my 3rd through 10th or something I wrote them all down. I carried it in my wallet forever, actually, those little 10 tattoos I did. I learned a lot, saw some more images that she had on her walls, saw how a tattoo shop was run in another town. It was my first experience in another tattoo shop. I was blown away, loved it, was hooked. The convention in 1982, my first convention was on the Queen Mary. When that happened, that was the convention. I think it was after when I went with Louis. It blew my mind. I had already met Paul Rogers. I was taken to Paul Rogers' house, I forgot to tell you, on my first date with Eric Inksmith.
Nice date.
If Paul did not approve of me, I probably wouldn't have been his girlfriend, but Paul loved me. We fell in love immediately. Helen was still alive. It was on Shetter Avenue, and he took me in the workshop. He took me in the iron factory back then, and that was in '81. And I got to see the iron factory and all these people's machines. I walked in to the iron factory, and he had these little milk containers hanging around, and I saw Ed Hardy, and I saw you know, like Horioshi, and I saw Mike Malone and all these people's names, and I was like, because I knew a little bit, because I had been reading what little bit I could get my hands on in Eric's shop. And it was amazing. I knew I was standing in the presence of a demigod. I was hooked. So we went to the tattoo convention there. I was escorted by Paul Rogers. So that's really how the doors opened for me. And that opened a whole world for me. I met Horioshi, I met Ed Hardy, I met Greg Irons, I met Suzanne Fowler, I met all the women, all the men. Anybody that was anybody was at that show. At that show. It was the creme de la creme of tattoo conventions, I think. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
There hasn't ever been anything like it, I think, in the world, as far as I'm concerned. And I was hooked. And I went back home, and my world expanded and opened. My artistic abilities changed, my lines changed, my coloring changed, my concepts changed, my design changed, everything changed. And then Philadelphia Eddie came to visit me one day, and he saw my cats. I was doing cat tattoos, portraits of cats. And I had that one cat book. We all ended up with the big cat book, right? They were talking really about how we got our design sizes and stuff. We couldn't really change sizes of anything back then. If it was in a book and you traced it, that was pretty much what you got. We didn't have copy machines. We didn't have anything to make things bigger or smaller. If you didn't know how to already draw it yourself.
I did the square thing.
You could
fold
do
it
that.
in the square,
You
fold
could
it
do
in
the
the
grid.
square, and do the square, those lines,
grid.
make it a little bit bigger.
We could do the grid system. You know, I went to college and studied that, but much later. But anyhow, that was really the only thing we could do. So with that, anything, and also way something faced. We didn't have really tracing paper, so the way something faced was also the way you got it. You know, we came from the acetate stencil days, where we had to cut our own stencils with an inscriber and plastic acetate, and then dump the stencil powder in it. So whatever way the stencil was already was the way the design was, unless you retrace it again on the other side, then you'd have a double image, you know, reverse image. But whatever size it was whatever size it was. There was no change in that. So that's why you saw a lot of tattoos in the beginning that were kind of jacked up and too small, and probably that was Ed's thing, you know, back then. It's just too small. We didn't know about too small. We didn't know about too big.
Be careful not to wipe it off, because
don't wipe anything, because a whole stencil would come off. So then you had to learn how to freehand. That was when I first learned how to freehand. Was wiping those damn things off by accident, right?
Fill in the line and try to make it look good. Oh, it's perfect.
But then that's also how a lot of them got wonky, because a lot of these people were not artists. They were stencil jockeys. Remember that? We called them stencil jockeys. All they could do was trace. All they could do was follow a line. They couldn't draw anything on their own. And we were taught, most of us were taught by stencil jockeys. So when the women started coming in and the East Coast style started mixing in with the Japanese influence, I think with the old school style started changing and the women started stepping in now, I started seeing a whole different influx of design quality, finer lines, more colorful, prettier images on the women, the way they flowed, the way we carried ourselves. And when they talked about dressing up at these shows, let me tell you something, we were dressed to the nines. And the way, when I met Peggy first, I told her today, the way I remember her from those days, the way she walked into a show, the way we all walked in was elegant. We did not carry ourselves like biker chicks or, thug life. We didn't,
It was
carried
an excuse
ourselves
to dress up.
Right, we loved it. It was an excuse to dress and be the most best of ourselves we could be and show the world that this was not, we were trying to pull that old stigma away from it. Because our men, we were talking about, didn't even want us to be tattooed. Our men Eric never wanted me to get a tattoo. I'm like, then why did you get me into this industry? If you don't want me to be tattooed, I loved it, So I had to kind of fight for that right, basically, to get tattooed myself as a tattoo artist, which was crazy. I remember when Jacci walked in for the first time, I was like, holy cow. Not only was she black, she was tall, and I told her with legs up to here, came in with the fanciest hats and the most elegant gowns. I was blown away. And then the tattoos were bigger than I had ever seen and beautifuler I had ever seen. And I was just like, that was a whole nother thing that's changed my life, changing my whole way of looking at stuff. So we were all an influence in each other's lives, because if we had to leave it up to the men, we'd still be like Flintstone tattooing, man, because I think that women changed, made it necessary for the industry to change, because we couldn't buy those old concepts anymore. Those things weren't working for us anymore. And the way the heaviness of the machines and the way that they did things and the uncleanliness of the shops that we had to work in. They put us to work cleaning all of us. They weren't clean before we got there, but they were sure clean after. Yeah, well, right after we left, they were damn sure clean. So guys start thinking, wow, no, this is pretty good. It smelled like candles, and we would burn incense and put flowers in there and move furniture around, and they'd be like, whoa, that's kind of nice. So they got used to it. But so slowly we had to migrate into the seriousness of actual tattooing. But we started off as cleaners and fetchers and pats on the head and strokes, and we all face the same sexual sort of like misconceptions. Like if you were in this industry, you're obviously a loose woman. You had seen it all, and a lot of us had not seen it all. We didn't want to see it all, but we were forced to see it all because, of the industry we were in. You're shut up in a room sometimes with a guy, there's nobody around, what do? And it's just like a lot of us had to fend for ourselves, deal with ourselves, even our employers. Were abused and pushed to the limit sometimes by even our employers, and we had to fight our way out and in of situations, and it was rough. And so when we get together as women now, which I think is wonderful, because men don't bond like this at conventions. They don't have a men's thing where we sit around and talk about history. They'd rather not know, But I feel it's so important because we're not only able to tie ourselves together with the history, but we can bring in the men that helped us along, that we hold in high regard. Even the losers, even the ones that abused us, did teach us some lessons, very serious, vital lessons on how to be strong women and wear tough skins in this industry, because we sure needed it, right? Basically, we did.
Yeah.
So I started in 1981, 1982. I started tattooing a little bit different. So I've been in the industry. I moved from Brunswick, Georgia to Jacksonville, Florida, and sat on the board of helping the guild, the Florida Tattoo Guild, opening and helped opening, and she knows some of the first rules and regulations for state of Florida to tattoo legally.
I had opened Deana Skin Art Studio in Orlando, and then I moved it out to Christmas, and I tattooed for 40 years. Opened my shop in 1984, but I met Philadelphia Eddie in Jacksonville, North Carolina, when I was up there with my ex-husband. Eddie had opened up a tattoo shop that was connected to a bar where I worked, and I used to hustle Marines in there for him to tattoo. And Luz Graberis had come and started working for him there. And Michelle was probably 7 years old. And I worked with his wife at the time, Nancy, and that's how I got to be friends with Lou. Lou kind of looked out for me and he would protect me. But I didn't consider tattooing because Eddie had already told me that women couldn't tattoo and they weren't allowed in the tattoo shop. So I didn't go in the tattoo shop. I'd hustle these guys and bring them in and sue them in. And eventually, after a while, I started going in with them and standing in and watching them tattoo. And, you know, Louis was cool with it. And when Eddie come in, he would get mad because I was in the tattoo shop. So when he was tattooing, I'd sneak up behind him and start watching him, and I'd watch him. And as I was watching him, I'd just get closer and closer, and then he'd notice me and he'd say, "Get out from behind me, what are you doing in here?" and start yelling at me. So I'd go back to work, because I'd have my breaks, I'd go there. And then Louis opened up the shop in Jazzland, and I'd moved from the Bowery over to Jazzland. I was working there, and he was my friend. He would drive me home sometimes. And I still wasn't tattooing, and knew I couldn't tattoo because it wasn't allowed. So eventually we came back home because my father and my parents had retired in Orlando, and we came back to Orlando, and I met a guy, Doc Anderson, that had come over from Hawaii, and his dad was a sign painter, and he was an artist, and he did tattoos. And so he approached me to trade me room and board for a year to teach me how to tattoo. And he said, if I teach you how to tattoo, don't do what I do. Do what I tell you to do. Because he was like a crazy tattoo guy. So he'd be tattooing somebody and they'd say, "Oh, I want something really big," and I was thinking about a back piece. And so he'd put a dot here and a dot here and a dot here. He'd say, "Well, about that big?" And they'd say, "Yeah." And he'd start going, "Wah," drawing stuff on them, you know? And I seen him tattoo it one time, and he says, "I don't know, I just was running good enough." And went, on his tongue. It was like, "Don't ever do that," he said to me.
Oh my God.
You know? And he was tattooing a guy one time, and he did something that was getting too high. He said, "I can't do this anymore. Finish it. Collect $300 for me." So he left, and I finished the tattoo. He collected the money. And he didn't come back, and somebody came, and I thought, "Well, I'm going to do this tattoo." And we didn't change the needles or nothing. Everything was just stuck in this little thing with the holes with the liquid underneath it, you know? So somebody wanted a tattoo. So I said, "I think I could do this." And I pulled out this one machine, and I didn't realize it was a single needle line. And I tried to make a line, and the needle was moving. And every time I tried to hit the line, it would make another line. And I was like really messing up this tattoo. And I'm starting to sweat. Like, this guy is over there so proud his wife's getting this tattoo. And I'm going, "Oh my God, I can't hit that line. The needle's moving. Why is the needle moving?" And Doc came back, and I said, "Oh, Doc, look." And he went, "Oh yeah, let me take over." So he took over and fixed the tattoo and covered all the mistakes I made and made a really nice tattoo. And I said, "What's wrong with that?" He said, "Well, I hang it out long because that's a single needle, and you're supposed to just work off the tip of it. You're not supposed to like use the whole thing and grind it in, you know." So that was a lesson I learned. But we used to do like biker runs and stuff like that. And he left, and I decided I wanted to continue tattooing, and I was using his equipment. So I talked to my dad, and he bought me a Spalding and Rogers starter kit. So I got the great big tall Spalding & Rogers power supply, and I got the clip cord, and I got the foot switch, and I bought a couple of tattoo machines, and I bought some pigments, but I didn't realize that you had to mix the pigments. So they were powder. So then I started researching how you mix the powder or whatever, so I tried alcohol, and it seemed to work. But then I talked to Eddie, and Eddie said, "No, the secret is vodka." Vodka. I said, "Vodka?" He said, "That's the best alcohol for mixing pigments." And I said, "Well, that makes sense. You can drink it. You should be able to put it in your body, and a couple other things, your vitamin E, your propylene glycol, and you know, a couple other things you put in there to make it creamy so it doesn't separate." So I started making all my pigments. I never tattooed with pigments that I didn't make myself, unless it was somebody that had like Mario Bart sent me a whole big box of his pigments to try these and tell me what you think. You know, well, I like this color, but I don't like this color, or, you know. And Dave Long gave me some pigments to try. And I opened my shop in '84 because I wanted to be legal. So I researched it and found out you have to have a doctor. And Lou was my friend, so I called Lou, and he was on the board trying to create a board for inspecting tattoo shops and licensing them and stuff. So I went up there, and they had a multimedia class, and they had a course that you had to take to teach you how to tattoo, and you had to have a, what's that shot they give you, the four-prong one?
Yeah, tuberculosis.
Tetanus, TB,
tuberculosis.
something like that.
Tuberculosis.
You had to make sure and go back and check it. It didn't make no sores there. And if it did, you couldn't tattoo. You know, so I didn't have nothing. And so I took my certificate back to Florida. So I got the certificate in this test grade I got in the 90s, and the certificate that passed. So I took it down, and I had all my equipment in the trunk of my car and went to the doctor, and I said, come on out here and I'll show you what I got to do. And I said, this is what you do. These are machines, and this is how you do that, and these are the tubes. Put the needles in here, and this is the pigment, and this is what I'm going to do. And I learned sterility, and I took my bloodborne pathogen and that course, and I took a multimedia course. So I got my card from the Red Cross, so if they pass out, they can't sue me if I wake them up and try to help them. Which I thought that would work.
Yeah. No.
And so I went down and I found a place to rent, and I got my dad co-signed for a loan for $2,000, and I went down and I paid the rent, and I got the license. The license was $35, and the doctor said he didn't want any money because he liked me and he thought I had a right to do tattoos if I wanted to, and so he signed for me. So he signed for me the whole time I was tattooing until we changed the law.
So I wanted to say something quick about pigments, because you had asked them earlier about the pigments. So I know a girl who is researching pigments recently, and where they were trying to figure out, like, there's so many companies now, you just do not know.
Predispersed
So
and
back in the old
homogenized
days,
plastic-based stuff, and some stuff's really bad to put in the skin.
well, back in the old days, we used all across the board. I learned from her, a pigment is a pigment is a pigment across the board, right? And they were starting to come back to us and try to ask us old timers. Now she was trying to get back to me and find out what were we using, because apparently what we were using back in the day is the safest crap out there.
You could eat the pigment at that
You could
time.
eat,
You could eat it, everything that was in it.
And now they're having so many
vitamin E,
problems with it.
Propylene glycol they use in dogs.
Yeah,
they use
so
it
they're
in
like,
people's
so
hair.
what did
It's
you
like,
use? And I'm like, well, you know, we use this and that.
The guys were the ones that were my friends that helped me. Like when I met Debbie from Roy Boy, I said, oh, you're famous. I saw you in a magazine. You know, you're just so great. And she went, and walked away. I was like, oh, heartbroken, you know, but all the guys accepted me. So I had a little difference, because Eddie loved me.
Eddie loved all the girls.
Louis loved me.
Louis loved all the
and
girls.
then I met Jack, and I used to run with him a little bit and watch him over his shoulder, and got to the point where I was bootlegging his flash at first, but we became really good friends. And at the end, he would say, well, if you want that off my flash, go get Deana to do it. She can copy it pretty good. Because he wanted to do just his own stuff, not what he put on the flash. Dick Borisaki and I and Brian Everett worked a lot together, so I had those other influences that helped me.